What's up, YouTube?
Today I'm going to share some footage of some recent PRs, but more importantly, we're going to get into the difference between what often gets called strength training in the modern fitness industry, which in many cases is more practice and peaking than really building strength, and general strength training, which is basically bodybuilding. And to do this, we're going to discuss one of my favorite assessment tools, which is the no practice PR.
And as it just so happens, really happy coincidence here, I talk about this concept of the no practice PR and its utility in training with a wider variety of lifts in my new book, Old Time Lifts for Modern Lifters, which is available in the description. It's been selling really well, and if it keeps selling this way, I think it'll be very realistic for me to start earning a living in fitness full time, which of course means more YouTube videos and other content. So if you want to keep supporting this channel, please buy it. But honestly, I wrote it to be a great resource. There's no way that I could possibly get that much detail with that degree of organization in the video anyway. So I think if you're interested in this, it's going to be a good resource for you. But it will help me grow the channel if you buy it. And also, if you wouldn't mind doing the algorithm bell stuff and all that, much appreciated. Anyway, let's get to the video. If you've been around the fitness industry for any length of time, you probably have an idea in your head of what it means to train for strength as opposed to just general resistance training, and certainly you probably have an idea about how strength training would differ from, say, hypertrophy training. Those often get differentiated between, right? You probably have an idea in your head of what strength training means, but I mean, is that really an accurate usage of the term? I would argue not in every case, right? See, in most cases, when we train for strength, we're training not for just some general quality that could be used for anything from wrestling to rock climbing to discus throwing to, I don't know, helping somebody move upstairs or something. We're typically talking about a strength sport, you know? And so what strength training has come to mean essentially is training to perform well in a particular sport. Obviously, these sports, to one degree or another, are designed to test strength, but inevitably they're going to test strength in a particular way. To take powerlifting, for example, you're going to be measuring 1 rep max squat, bench, and deadlift, right? Now, obviously, with the general conception of strength, there are a lot more ways that strength could be tested and expressed than the 1 rep max squat, bench, and deadlift, right? It could be different motions, it could be different numbers of repetitions, any number of things could be different, right? But obviously, when you have a competitive sport, you have to standardize what the measure is, and obviously every sport tries to find a good way to measure strength because we all want to know who the strongest guy is, right? One of them is even called, well, the highest competition in strongman is called World's Strongest Man. We want to know who the strongest man in the world is, and I would argue that World's Strongest Man probably figures it out in most cases, right? I mean, they have as good a claim as anyone, but at the end of the day, any sport is nevertheless going to be a certain measure. So how much of what we're training for when we train for that sport is training for the general quality we're trying to test, and how much of it is training to do really well at that metric, right? You're going to get that with anything. I wrote an essay article on Instagram a while ago that did really well, where I compared strength training to 0 to 60 time in cars. If you're not familiar with it, that's the time that it takes for a car to get from a dead stop to 60 miles an hour. Obviously, the quicker that is, the faster the car is. And back in the day, that used to be a really good measure for how well cars could perform, because that one metric would take into account, power to weight ratio. It would take into account traction, any number of things. And generally, if a car could perform well at that metric, it would perform well at any number of other functions. It wasn't perfect, but it was a good indicator, broadly speaking, of how quick and sporty the car was. That was until, of course, manufacturers started gaming the system. One big thing there was launch control. They started essentially automating the launch process, so you're getting 0 tire slippage and just maximally putting down the car's power to the road in kind of an automated process that's going to be quicker than what any normal human could do. You start playing with the gear ratios to where they perform best in that particular band. Maybe there are some sacrifices. In fact, there will be. If you do that, you can optimize for maximum performance there with the gearing. It's going to mean sacrifices later on down the road. Anyway, probably putting all-wheel drive on some cars where it doesn't really need it other than bragging rights. Anyway, there are a number of things that led to in a number of ways they tried to game the system with that, and what it ended up being was that now 0 to 60 times really not nearly as good of an indicator as it used to be, because so much of it now is just system gaming, and it's not going to show up in any other area of performance, right? Your launch control is not going to do anything for your car's trackability whatsoever. It's purely assisting that 0 to 60 times. So now, all the seconds you're saving on your 0 to 60 time, that has absolutely no carryover to anything else the car's ever going to do, right? So you get the idea. So a lot of this is, learning the metric versus just actual generalizable performance. Kind of the same thing with a college admission exam, or LSAT or something like that. You can really just practice the test and get really good at like the actual specifics of the test, where you've seen all that and every aspect of the test, so you're just getting better at that particular test. Does that necessarily mean you're going to do? I mean, because in reality, these things are kind of like a disguised IQ test, right? I mean, they can't say it's an IQ test because they're not allowed to use that for a lot of things, but that's kind of what it is. So to somebody who's just really practiced the test and knows that test like the back of their hand, getting a certain score mean the same as somebody who just like came in and took the test kind of the way you're supposed to be honest with you? No, right? And it's the same thing with, strength training. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to get good at your sport. If you're playing a sport, of course you want to get good at it. And like there's a ton of performance that you're going to get by practicing the sport, right? So why would you leave that on the table? It's stupid, right? The problem is, all that trickles back down into regular gym culture for people who aren't necessarily trying to be athletes in a particular sport, right? I mean, powerlifting is the worst example here, because like so much of lifting is powerlifting, or powerlifting rather. I kind of got ahead of myself. Like that's the whole power building thing. So many lifters are basically aping powerlifting practices, even though they may never actually compete in the sport of powerlifting. Does it become a problem then? Well, kind of, because you're spending a lot of your training time just practicing for something that you're never going to do. Why would you sit around doing LSAT practice if you don't really have any plans to take the LSAT, right? It doesn't necessarily make any sense. And I do think, I mean, basically what a lot of what we call strength training is, it's practice. And again, nothing wrong with practicing something you want to be good at, but if you're thinking that practicing a particular skill is necessarily going to have carryover to other skills where that particular skill is not called into play, I mean, maybe not so much. Maybe with something where it's extremely similar, but probably a lot of that specific skill practice is not going to carry over so well in other places, right? And then another aspect of that is simply peaking, right? You're trying to taper your volume, manage it where you're getting enough practice, that your skill's in peak condition, but at the same time you're allowing enough recovery to just set you up to perform extremely well on a particular day. You'll hear a lot of times, power lifters or strength athletes say, gym lifts don't count, none of this stuff matters, save it for the platform. And if you're a competitive lifter, of course that's correct, right? Everything is just to kind of build up to and set you up for that perfect performance on the platform that one day, right? Okay, but again, if you're never going to be on the platform, I mean, does any of that really matter? No. And out of all that, how much are you going to hold on to? Like, how much of that peak are you going to hold on to? How much are you going to have throughout the rest of your life when you're not peaking? Maybe not so much. So for the powerlifters out there, yeah, absolutely. Only the platform counts, gym lifts don't count. But for the rest of you, gym lifts might count more than your 1 rep maxes, or even if, let's say you're you might compete like once a year. You don't really care that much, but you do it a couple times a year, or maybe a couple times a series. Like you do it maybe once a year, once every 2 years, because your buddies do or something. Well, in that case, what you can do in the gym on a kind of regular basis or whenever might actually be more important than what you can do on the platform, because that's what you have every day. That's what you're carrying around with you. That's the tangible benefit you're getting from your training. Now, I want to get into one permutation of that, which is what I call the no practice PR. Something that I've noticed, because I do a much wider variety of lifts than typically people do with strength training. So, needless to say, I can't do them all at once, right? I don't just do randomness. Obviously, I have particular lifts in my rotation at any one time that I'm trying to progress and get better at, just like anybody else. But I have to rotate. Like, I can't have them all in rotation at once. So as a result, lifts tend to just get completely either put on the back burner or more often just completely untrained for long periods of time. So one thing that I like to look at as a way of seeing if it's working or if I'm just kind of, you know, practicing up one lift and then I stop practicing it and fall off. I like to see what happens when I pick up a lift that I haven't done in a long time and how that does. And, you know, if I lose a lot of my performance from last time, maybe I didn't gain anything generally, but if my performance is around equal to or even better, maybe, you know, maybe even the first session, or if not that, maybe with a couple weeks to ramp back into it, if I'm hitting PRs, you know, with a long layoff, no practice, that's a really good sign that what I'm doing is building general strength, not peak, not practice, just I'm doing something completely different, and now I'm hitting PRs in something that I haven't touched. That, I think, is a lot more significant for your general population person who is not, you know, planning to compete or anything than any kind of, you know, peak lift that, you know, you build up through for months and you hit that peak performance and then you won't be able to hit anything like that again until next time you go through that entire process. You don't take any of it with you. So now I'm going to share with you a couple of recent examples of this where I hit, you know, big PRs without any kind of practice whatsoever, and I'll talk about that a little bit more.
I tend to get pigeonholed as the Zercher guy, but it's actually been a minute since I've worked on Zercher squats. I did them maybe twice last year. It's really been about 3 years since I've trained them seriously, and at that time my rep PR at 405 was 12 reps, so I wanted to see if I could beat them out of the blue. This was my first time picking them back up, and lo and behold, I hit 13 reps, which is a good sign that everything I've been doing has been working. The Zercher squat is a fairly brute strength oriented lift, so it's a good way to show general strength gains. And additionally, going for kind of medium to high reps like I'm doing here is a great way to show this general strength gains. When you go for 1 rep maxes, that does tend to be a little bit more skill and technique oriented. And at the really high reps, rep cycling skill can also become a factor. But this medium to high rep range is a great way to just show general strength gains, and that's exactly what we saw here. In a minute, you're going to see one of the quad exercises that I think did contribute. One of the major things I've been working on this bulk has been sissy squats, like I'm about to show you here. I like to do just unassisted sissy squats into band-assisted sissy squats for kind of a mechanical drop set. That works really well. I think I've gotten a lot of quad strength and knee strength from that. Some other things that I think have contributed to the no practice Zercher squat PR. Obviously, Jefferson curls have just strengthened the posterior chain a lot. And then I think snatch grip deadlifts, which have been a major lift for this bulk, I think have also played a role. But just generally increasing strength. I mean, it's not too surprising that if you get stronger, you can demonstrate that on any lift. And I think a relatively brute strength oriented lift is a great way to see that. As you can see, I'm training in the rain. Honestly, I don't mind. It's fun, and it's been really good for California. As you'll see in a second, the creeks are really flowing. We got lots of snowfall. We're going to have a really great wildflower bloom. All the wildlife is happy, so I'm happy to train in it. I certainly don't mind in the slightest, and it's going to be a really wonderful spring. So here's another one, a 355 one-arm Zercher that I did 3 days fasted. I hadn't practiced this in years, so if I can hit it's a mild PR, but still, I'm hitting a PR after not eating for 3 days, so that's a fairly good sign things are going well. And here's a mild rep PR that I'm setting on the Kelly snatch. Again, fasted I think 2 days here. A pretty good sign that I'm hitting PR on something like this with like 0 practice, because it's somewhat technical at least. So it's another good sign that just generally, in this case, probably my just fold position and my rear delts are just getting stronger.
So those are just a couple recent examples of no practice PRs that I've hit, and that's just a signal that my training is going well generally. It means that the qualities needed for those lifts, whether they be strength in most cases, a little bit mobility in the case of the Kelly snatch, whatever the case may be, they're being effectively addressed through other training that I have been doing. So for the Zercher squats, for example, I haven't done Zercher squats in forever, but I did. I did a bunch of sorry, why am I blanking? Snatch grip deadlifts, which I think helped a lot this year. That was one of my main lifts on my bulk, and obviously I've been doing a bunch of Jefferson curls, which of course are going to strengthen the posterior chain a ton. So, we see the Jefferson curl also probably benefited the Kelly snatch because it's improving my forward fold position, and I've been focusing a whole lot on my rear delts recently, so that area is probably a lot stronger too. Triceps as well, that helps a little bit there. So those were muscle groups I was trying to train, and that resulted in a mild rep PR, nothing crazy, but still it's nice to be hitting PRs while not even eating. So that's a good sign that my training is going well. And really all that means is I'm just doing general bodybuilding. Now obviously I use some lifts that people don't normally associate with bodybuilding, but I'm building muscle, I'm building like real generalizable strength at higher rep ranges. It's just basic bodybuilding. And if you do bodybuilding, your lifts on some level should all be going up a little bit, even if you're not practicing, peaking, doing what anybody would normally consider to be strength training, just because, the muscles you use ought to be getting stronger, and some of the other stuff ought to be getting trained well as well. So, I don't think that there is this big split between, hypertrophy and strength that a lot of people think that there is. I think there's just the difference between, are you practicing that specific skill or not? But, these are not the only examples I've got. These are just the most recent ones that I saw footage of. I mean, this is something that's been going on for years, that I've been noticing for years, has been working really well. While doing a lot of these odd lifts, old-time lifts, and just having to rotate by necessity, it happens. I'm still building the muscles and qualities and strength that I need, regardless of whether I'm doing the specific lift or not. Now, obviously, if I wanted to get really good and do like a super awesome 1-rep max at any of them, I'd have to peak for it. I'd have to train specifically for that. I don't necessarily care to do that in most cases because I'd rather just build generally, and I know if I just practice one specific thing, it's not necessarily going to carry over to the other stuff. I'll get a good PR on that lift, and that'll feel really cool, but then I'll be less likely to see the no practice PRs that I want to see, that I actually honestly value a lot more now. I hate to say it, but I almost kind of, like, if I have to practice something to hit the PR, I almost kind of look down on it a little bit because, like, I know I don't have that. It's like a trophy that I can put on my wall. Can I replicate that performance? Not necessarily. Whereas if, I'm just building skills or if I'm building abilities generally, then I have it. It's mine, it's going to be that no practice PR that I have will be reflected in muscle size in other areas, right? It'll be reflected in other lifts. So I tend to actually value that a lot more and just treat that as a really good sign that my training is working. And you can just chalk that up along with, your rep PRs, your, the mirror, just clothing fitting differently. Just another way of knowing that you're making progress. And it's just really reassuring when you start seeing that, when you do branch out. Because this stuff, people don't train like this normally. So you worry you're going to, if I don't do X, Y, and Z exercise, I'm going to lose all my progress in that exercise, and I'll lose all the gains I made in that exercise, and everything will, fall apart. It's really reassuring when you see that that's not the case. In fact, a lot of times, the best way to get better at an exercise is just to stop beating yourself into the ground on that one and find something that helps you build what that exercise needs in other ways. All right, that's all. I just wanted to share on that little concept, and I hope that was interesting for you guys. There's a little bit more detail on it in my book if you're interested, as well as all the exercises that I talked about. I think, yeah, anyway. All right, thanks for watching.